Hi everyone, my name is Brooke Buckner and I am enrolled in Chem 1005 biochemistry, and for my case 4 connection I chose to focus on both case 1 and case 3. So in case 3, where the newborn was rushed to the hospital feeling lethargic, our job was to determine what diagnostic could be measured to and deciphered whether it was a urea cycle disorder versus a beta oxidation disorder. So when comparing the 4 diagnostics, I found that the best diagnostic to measure in this patient's case would be plasma glutamine levels. Glutamine is a non-essential fatty acid, and it is formed by the enzyme glutamine synthetase, and a defect in this gene would result in a decrease of glutamine synthesis. Now, glutamine's job is to really detoxify ammonia and remove it from the system. And if glutamine is not being synthesized, ammonia can increase to toxic levels, and especially in newborns can result in brain injury and even death. Glutamine also serves as nitrogen and oxygen carriers, so this particular diagnostic is indicative of a urea cycle disorder. When comparing the other diagnostics, the first being blood glucose, that's really a measure of carbohydrate metabolism, so that really wouldn't be appropriate in this case. And then urinary acids, as I'll talk about later with the other case, is really a measure of purine synthesis. And fatty acids reflect really abnormalities in lipid metabolism, so that really wouldn't be indicative of urea acid disorder. So in this case, the enzyme which would likely be deficient would be the glutamine synthetase enzyme, which is responsible for the synthesis of glutamine. So if glutamine levels are decreased, again, there are increased levels of ammonia, resulting in serious illness, brain injury, death, especially in newborns. One enzyme that probably isn't involved is arginase, and it plays a role in cleaving a group, I think it's called guanidino group of the arginine, resulting in the release of urea. So not really affected in this case. So the next disorder, or the next case that I would like to talk about, is the man who came in. He has gout, says he has a lot of pain in his, I think, right toe, and again, three contributors and mechanisms relating to his diagnosis were given. And based on this patient's presentation, the most likely cause of his gout is the overproduction of purines. So in a normal situation, the body begins purine synthesis by transferring 2 phosphoryl groups to the first carbon of ribose 5-phosphate, which produces a compound known as pyrophosphate, or PRPP. And this is going to play a large role in the development of gout, as you'll see later on. This enzyme is then catalyzed by the enzyme called PRPP synthetase, which leads to the formation of the ionizing monophosphate, also called IMP. The IMP then branch out, they extend to AMP and GMP monophosphates, which are then converted to ADP and GDP through more phosphorylation, and then ADP is phosphorylated once more, forming ATP in the process. So a defect in PRPP synthetase may result in hyperactivity, leading to the overproduction of purines. In this case, there's an increased affinity for ribose 5-phosphate, and therefore increased secretion. As a result of this defect, there's high serum urate levels, which are no longer soluble. So these compounds, which were once soluble, are not. And so instead of dissolving, this urate really crystallizes and forms really a solid in the tissues of the individual. And most people, if they have that, they develop an inflammatory response, and develop what's called gouty arthritis, and they find it hard to move because it is so painful with these crystals in tissues. Overproduction of purines is most likely the contributing mechanism for this diagnosis. When comparing it to the other two mechanisms, salvaging purines, this is when PRPP adds a phosphoryl group so that the purines are then converted to mononucleotides, which is not an indicator for gout. So in this case, the mononucleotides are no longer free purines, which are a major contributor to gout. So, and then also really the root cause cannot be attributed to the decreased urinary excretion of uric acid, because if you look at this individual's blood panel, his uric acid panel, it's way below even the normal range. So that's really not possible. So, pardon me, the consumption at the end, when he mentions consuming a large amount of soda every day with sugar, because he's afraid to drink sugar-free or diet drinks, it's probably making his gout worse. So if a person does have gout, their bodies are more likely to undergo oxidative stress, which ultimately leads to decreased insulin sensitivity and resistance, increased resistance, causing, again, an increase in inflammatory response. So this increased inflammation will not only lead to increased blood glucose levels, but also more pain in the joint tissues for this individual. So